Okay, ready to dive into some fascinating stuff today.
Let's do it.
We're looking at Chris Butler
Ah,
and his organization, the Science of Identity Foundation,
okay.
which some people call CHRISCON.
Interesting.
And, you know, we've got this whole collection of like
Right.
forum posts, articles,
Yeah.
legal documents, even a book on sannyasa.
Sounds like someone's been doing their homework.
Yeah, it seems
Yes.
like
Right.
we're really trying to get to the bottom of
Okay.
how Butler's SIF,
Okay.
where he's operating as the guru Siddhaswarupananda,
Yeah.
how it diverges from traditional
Right.
Gaudiya Vaishnavism.
It's a fascinating area, isn't it?
Yeah, and one of the things that
Yeah.
I found really interesting is this whole concept of sannyasa, this renounced order of life in Hinduism.
Yeah.
So we're seeing Butler like claiming to be a sannyasi, but then there are all these accusations that he's kind of abandoned those principles while still holding on to the titles and privileges.
That's a really interesting paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
To really get this, we need to, we should probably first talk about sannyasa and what it actually is.
Yeah, break it down for us. What is sannyasa all about?
So traditionally, it's a path of complete renunciation, right? You detach from all these worldly possessions, desires, everything.
So like giving up everything, material wealth, your status, even family?
Basically, yeah. Like it's all about focusing solely on spiritual liberation.
That's intense.
But, there are different types of sannyasa. Some involve, like completely withdrawing from society, while others are more about service to a guru or a community.
Okay, so there's some variation.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah. And what's interesting here is that Butler initially, he embraced sannyasa within ISKCON,
Right.
but the sources kind of suggest a disconnect between what he says he is and what he actually does later on.
Yeah, and it seems like, at least from what we're seeing, he's living a life that's like pretty incompatible with what you'd expect.
Right.
There are mentions of like a luxurious lifestyle and control over his followers' lives and even involvement in like business and politics.
This is where those forum posts and, the accounts from former SEF members, they get really interesting because they provide like specific examples of his behavior and demands that seem to like go against the traditional idea of sannyasa.
All right, so before we get into those specifics, can we just like rewind a bit and give people a little background on Chris Butler and how he got here?
Yeah, so Butler's path, it's a fascinating one.
Yeah.
He started with a commune linked to the Sivananda ashram, which then became the Krishna yoga community.
Okay, so he was involved in a few different things before ISKCON.
Yeah, and then he joined ISKCON in 71 and got the name Siddhaswarupananda, embracing that whole Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition.
But then he splits from ISKCON, right?
He does.
What?
What happened there?
It seems like there were some disagreements with the leadership there.
What kind of disagreements?
Questioning some of their practices, their interpretations of bhakti yoga, feeling like they weren't really true to the tradition's essence.
So this is interesting to me because like already we're seeing a theme here of Butler kind of reinterpreting and modifying existing traditions.
Absolutely, to align with his own evolving vision.
So then he forms SIF as a way to practice and promote his own version of...
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah, of bhakti yoga.
The sources suggest that he saw himself as a reformer.
Offering a more accessible path to enlightenment.
And that's where his modifications to the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition really come in.
Precisely. Well, SIF says it's based on the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the founder of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. There are some pretty big differences in how Butler actually does things.
Like what specifically?
So one area is the whole structure and hierarchy of the organization. Traditional Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it's all about a lineage of gurus, this system of initiation. But it seems like Butler's made himself.
So it's less about a lineage.
It seems like it.
Yeah, and more about him being like the main source.
Exactly.
Of spiritual knowledge.
And this goes back to the sannyasa thing and the accusations of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
The sources show that Butler's life, with the, all the material comfort and control, it doesn't really fit the image of a renunciate.
It's like he wants the authority and reverence.
It seems like it.
That come with being a sannyasi.
Right.
But without actually,
living the life.
Yeah, living the life that goes with it.
Exactly. And that raises questions, right, about spiritual authority and the possibility that it could be misused.
This is getting really interesting.
It is, isn't it?
We've got this spiritual leader who's changing a traditional path.
Yeah.
Claiming to be a renunciate.
Yeah.
While allegedly living a life of luxury.
Right.
And his followers see him as
It's quite a story.
Yeah, as a world teacher.
It is. It is.
I definitely want to hear more about those specific examples.
Yeah, we should definitely get into those.
Of his behavior and the allegations against him.
But, before we do, I think it's important to understand the historical context.
Okay.
How his modifications to Gaudiya Vaishnavism fit into this larger picture of new religious movements.
That sounds fascinating, yeah. Tell me more.
So the rise of these movements, especially in the West in the 20th century, it was fueled by this search for meaning and alternative ways of living.
Right.
A lot of these movements took inspiration from.
So you're saying Butler's modifications are part of a broader trend?
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
This is where the idea of cultural translation becomes important.
So when ideas move across cultures?
Exactly. They change.
Yeah.
Things get emphasized, others get downplayed, and you get new interpretations.
So Butler's kind of acting as a cultural translator then?
That's one way to see it.
Bringing those Gaudiya Vaishnava ideas to the West.
Yeah, but you got to think about the power dynamics here too. Critics would say that Butler's gone beyond simple translation.
So it's not just about making it accessible.
It's more about, is he manipulating things for his own gain?
Yeah.
That's the kind of question we're going to be looking at as we dig deeper.
Okay, I'm ready to dig deeper. Let's hear some of those
Let's get into
specific examples from these sources.
Okay.
Like, what have former SIF members said about Butler's behavior and what it was like?
One of the big things that comes up in those forum posts is the level of control that Butler had over his followers' lives.
And what kind of control are we talking about?
We found some really interesting accounts. Like one former member talks about a policy about serving Butler while he was skiing with his family.
Okay.
They weren't allowed to laugh or smile if he was having fun.
That's weird.
Another one talked about Butler berating his kitchen staff. He's like, I've got all these servants. I'm spending all this money on ingredients, and you can't make something good to eat.
That's funny.
And then he orders Chinese takeout.
Wow.
Yeah, talk about a disconnect between image and reality.
So he's claiming to be this renunciate?
Right.
But he's, like, enjoying gourmet meals?
Exactly.
Expensive hobbies?
Right.
And it sounds like his followers were expected to, like...
to cater to his every whim.
Yeah, cater to his every whim.
These anecdotes, they might seem small, but they really give you a sense of the power dynamic.
Right. It really makes you wonder about that gap between what he says and how he's actually behaving.
These are just a few examples, though. There's a lot more that raises questions about his leadership and the culture of SIF.
Okay, this is definitely getting interesting.
It is.
Yeah. I think we need to take a break.
Yeah, let's take a moment
to absorb all this. We'll be back soon.
We'll be right back.
To continue our deep dive into the world of Chris Butler.
Sounds good.
And the Science of Identity Foundation.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, we're back. And I got to say, this whole image versus reality thing.
Yeah, it's pretty central to this whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it just keeps coming up.
It goes way beyond Butler's personal life, too.
Okay, so where else are we seeing it?
It's in the structure of SIF itself and in how it actually operates.
Okay, what have you found?
So one of the big criticisms is how Butler seems to have changed, modified those traditional Gaudiya Vaishnava teachings.
In what way? What do you mean by restructured?
Well, traditional Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it emphasizes that lineage of gurus, that system of initiation. Knowledge gets passed down through generations of teachers. But a lot of these sources, they suggest that Butler's made himself like the only...
So instead of a lineage, it's like...
It seems like it, yeah. A direct line of Butler.
Yeah, like he's the sole source.
Yeah, and this ties back to how he interprets sannyasa. Traditionally, as sannyasi, they give up everything. They dedicate their life to, the spiritual stuff. But critics argue that the way Butler lives and those allegations of control, it contradicts that whole principle.
Yeah, like he's claiming the authority of sannyasa.
Exactly.
But not really living it out.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
It really raises questions, right? About
it does.
Spiritual authority in general.
Yeah.
And whether it can be, misused.
Absolutely. And that's something to really think about.
So Butler puts himself at the center.
Yeah.
How did this actually affect his followers, their experiences?
Right. And that's where those firsthand accounts from former SIFE members, they're really valuable. They give us a
Okay, so what are we seeing in those accounts?
Okay, so the sources mention a really strict code of conduct. This big emphasis on obeying Butler's teachings, his instructions.
So there's this pressure to conform.
It seems like it, yeah.
With SIF's norms.
Right, even if it means giving up their own goals or relationships.
So it's about complete submission to his authority.
It seems that way, but that level of devotion, it's not necessarily unique to SIF. Lots of spiritual groups
that's true.
have strong hierarchies.
Right.
But the sources here, they suggest this dynamic in SIF might have had some negative consequences.
Like what specifically?
Some former members say they were pressured to work for SIF businesses with little to no pay.
Wow.
It was framed as...
So it wasn't even like...
emotional service.
It wasn't just about spiritual devotion. There was a financial aspect too.
It seems that way. They talk about this system where if you questioned Butler's authority or disagreed with him, you were basically ostracized.
Wow. So they were really controlling...
It sounds like there was a real blurring of the lines between, spiritual practice, personal life, and their economic activity.
This is starting to sound less like a spiritual community and more like...
Yeah, a lot of people use the term CHRISCON to describe SIF.
Right.
It kind of highlights that idea.
Interesting.
That Butler created a system all about himself.
Right, yeah.
And his teachings, not really following traditional...
Like he took elements of the tradition and twisted them.
To fit his own vision.
To fit his own vision. And this brings us back to that question of sannyasa.
It does.
If he's living this luxurious life, controlling his followers, engaging in all this worldly stuff, how does that fit with, being a renunciate?
It's a really interesting contradiction.
And speaking of contradictions, what about his involvement?
Right, yeah.
In politics, what about his connection?
Yeah, the sources definitely point to a strong connection between Butler and the Gabbard family.
What kind of connection are we talking about?
Well, reports suggest that Butler had a big influence over their political activities, especially Tulsi Gabbard and her father, Mike Gabbard.
Interesting.
Some sources even say he helped shape their campaign strategies.
So his beliefs?
It makes you wonder how much SIF's influence played a role in their political decisions.
Wow, this is a lot to take in. We have this spiritual leader who's modified this traditional path, claiming to be a renunciate.
Right.
While seemingly living, anything but that life.
Yeah.
And allegedly involved in politics.
It's like something out of a movie. And we're not even done yet.
There's more. What else is there?
We haven't even gotten to those financial allegations.
Right, the financial stuff.
And SIF's link to QN.
Yeah, QN.
That multi-level marketing company.
Okay, yeah, let's hear about that.
So, first off, there are allegations that a higher-ranking SIF leader, Alan Tibby, also known as Acharya Das, is wanted.
Wow. For money laundering?
Yeah, in India. For money laundering connected to QNet.
And how does QNet fit into all of this?
Well, QNet, they've been accused of being a pyramid scheme. People get recruited to sell stuff, but they make money based on who they recruit. Not on actual sales.
Gotcha.
Some former SIF members say they were pressured.
So they were pressured?
To get involved with QNet, even investing their own money.
So they were mixing.
It's definitely ethically questionable, to say the least.
It makes you wonder, about exploitation within the organization.
Yeah, it reinforces those questions we've been talking about genuine spiritual seeking and the possibility of someone misusing their authority.
Yeah, for personal gain.
Well, personal gain.
This is a lot.
It is.
Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
There's a lot more going on
than meets the eye.
Yeah.
I'm definitely curious to hear more.
Yeah, let's dig deeper into those finances.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, we're back. And, wow, there's a lot to unpack here with these financial allegations against SIF.
Yeah, it gets pretty murky.
We know about Alan Tibby, that high-ranking SIF leader.
Right.
Wanted in India.
Yeah.
For money laundering connected to QNet.
It's a serious charge.
But what about the regular SIF members?
That's a good question.
What were their experiences?
Well, what we're seeing in the sources is
Yes.
pretty worrying.
Okay.
It seems a lot of former members felt pressured to donate a big chunk of their income
To the organization.
to SIF, yeah. Some even say they were told to give up
Wow, really?
personal assets or invest in SIF businesses.
So this idea of devotional service,
Right, exactly.
it wasn't just about, like, volunteering your time.
It seems like it went way beyond that.
Yeah.
It included money.
So it's like they're mixing spiritual devotion with financial obligation.
Yeah, and that raises some red flags, ethically speaking.
Yeah, I mean, were people really giving freely?
Right.
Or was it more like coercion?
You have to wonder.
Especially with that link between giving and spiritual progress.
Exactly. It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely makes you think about the potential for exploitation.
Right, because you have this spiritual leader.
When someone has that much authority, it's a recipe for trouble.
And this is where, again, that concept of sannyasa just keeps coming back.
It's a central question here.
If he's supposed to be renouncing all these worldly things.
Exactly, renouncing it all.
But then there's all this focus on money and success.
It doesn't really add up, does it?
It's a big contradiction.
It's a puzzle.
Is it even possible to be a true renunciate?
That's the million-dollar question.
While also leading this organization.
People have been debating this for centuries.
With all its businesses and financial dealings.
There are different interpretations of sannyasa, of course.
Yeah.
Some might say Butler's actions are compatible with it.
Okay.
But from what we've seen in these sources, it seems pretty clear that his lifestyle and what's going on within SIF, it goes against that traditional idea of renunciation.
And then you add in those allegations about politics.
Yeah, the Q-Tet connection.
Yeah.
The stories from former members who felt controlled.
It paints a troubling picture.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
This is where, we have to be really careful.
Right.
We need to look at these sources critically.
Absolutely. Question our assumptions.
Yeah. Consider different viewpoints.
Be willing to dig deeper.
Exactly. We can't just accept everything at face value.
Yeah. This whole deep dive has really made me think.
Me too. It's fascinating how spirituality, power, and money,
it's all intertwined.
They get tangled up in such complicated ways.
It's a good reminder.
Yeah.
That even when we're seeking spirituality,
absolutely,
we have to be careful, use our judgment.
We can't just have blind faith.
We have to question authority.
Especially with spiritual leaders.
Even spiritual leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really important takeaway.
I think that's a great point.
From this whole deep dive.
To remember, keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Keep exploring. Keep trying to understand.
The nuances of it all.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, I think that's a wrap for this episode.
It's been great exploring these sources with you.
Of the deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
It really has.
On this journey into the world of Chris Butler.
And remember, everyone.
And the Science of Identity Foundation.
Keep learning, keep diving deep.